Hey there, in this video we are going to be dissecting a couple of designs, specifically looking at the typography, why it works, what fonts were used, and how you can achieve a really great layout using pretty much just type only, maybe paired with a nice photo. So let's go ahead and dig in. First of all, before we even look at the designs, the main thing I'm looking for when I'm creating a type-driven brand is something that achieves contrast, legibility, hierarchy, and versatility when it comes specifically to typesetting. And even more important is when you have a lot of content to lay out, these things really need to shine and come to the forefront. So as we are selecting typefaces, it's important to keep those things in mind. And let's go ahead and just dig into the brand. So first up, we have the sample design that I created called the Ruby. This is a fictional brand, and I love creating kind of concept work because it really allows you to have no limits when it comes to creativity, no client challenges, things like that, and really just allows you to focus specifically on design and aesthetics and functionality. So first up, we have the logo type here. Honestly, I did no customization to the font whatsoever. If this was a client, I probably would take a deeper look into the logo type itself. But for this brand, I did this entire layout in maybe 30 minutes to an hour total, finding the photos, the logo, and the typesetting and content, everything together. So it's a fun exercise. I highly recommend you do this. Find a photo and then pair it next to some type of type-driven layout design using one color. And that really helps you focus on the type specifically and allows you to create a functional and beautiful layout design that doesn't have colors and illustrations and things like that competing with the type. So let's dig into the logo type. It's just called the Ruby, and I use the font Brand Standard, and it's a great logo type font because it's really legible. It looks super custom with the. I just love the letter forms and how they all work together. It's also nice that I chose a brand name that's fairly simple and small, and so that really allowed the type to shine. Below that, we have homemade pies, cakes, and bakes for every occasion, and that is set in GT America Expanded. And below that is sweets, also set in America Expanded. I just created an outlined version of that. And chocolate mousse, all the titles there are also America Expanded. And then below that is Adobe Caslon Pro, which is the italic serif right there. So, in the photo is from Social Squares, and I just modified the colors as well as the pattern on the counter there, which you can tell I really quickly photoshopped, but it gets the job done. So what works about this type-driven layout? Let's go ahead and just dig in deep to some of these things here. In a succinct and brief video here, so the Ruby is the logo type, and that works because it stands out on its own. It does not compete with the rest of the type. This is important specifically when you're working with logo types rather than an illustrated brand, because you are going to be having that logo type compete with any other type on the page, whether that's a website, stationery design, magazine layout, an ad, whatever it may be. That logo type needs to feel distinct from the rest of the layout rather than a subtitle. So the way you can do that easily is to just create a different font or create a custom type, logo type. And that way it really is always going to be distinct from the type. Now, I don't think that's a hard and fast rule necessarily, but that's what I did here, and it's really easy to follow. So the logo is set apart from the rest of the type-driven brand. Below that, we have the homemade pies, cakes, and bakes. This is an expanded sans serif, and it really has a lot of contrast with the logo type as well as with the serif italic Caslon Pro font below that. And the reason I selected those is they're actually very different fonts, and so they naturally have a lot of contrast already included with them. Whenever you're selecting fonts for a type-driven brand, it's great to have something that's versatile. So America is actually a very versatile typeface. This is just the expanded version, and there's a lot of other variations and styles included. And so I look for versatility when it comes to selecting type. And then also a sans and a serif just naturally are going to have a contrast with each other. and pair that with America is a really modern expanded sans. And then Caslon is more of a traditional serif, especially when it's in italics here. So there's a lot of contrast there. And so that already creates a lot of contrast within the hierarchy and helps establish that kind of system as well. So when creating a type-driven brand, you want to make sure that you are focusing on the hierarchy of the design. Now, even if you're just creating a logo for a company or a brand for a company, it's always nice to dig in a little bit deeper into creating a type-driven brand so that you can create fonts that are going to be versatile for that brand moving forward. And to do that, you need to do kind of a sample layout like I've done here to really help you as a designer consider what's working long-term for the client and is flexible and adaptable for them. So these fonts all work together because there's naturally hierarchy built in contrast through the sans and serif contrasting there. Also, there's a lot of play in America. It's a modern sans font and making it outlined just periodically, not often, like where it says sweets there. It's kind of a fun, modern, lighthearted way to incorporate type into this brand as well. So hopefully that helps as we just dig in briefly into the Ruby, what works and why. The main things we look for to recap are contrast and hierarchy and variation and creating some distinction from the logo type. Next up, we have the Smokehouse. Again, this is another fictional brand that I created. I think this one took 15 to 30 minutes maybe. It's really quick. I kind of knew what I was going for already. I wanted to select a very different brand from the Ruby so that you can see how we are creating type-driven brands and layouts using different fonts and different aesthetics, different audiences as well. So the Smokehouse, I pulled this photo from Unsplash, I believe, and I created this logo type here. Again, I didn't customize a single thing within there. It's pretty lazy design, but it's a really great exercise in flexing your typography skills and using new fonts. So the logo type is comprised of Blackbike, Clean, and Brothers. And I selected this font, Brothers specifically, because it has that kind of rugged feel to it, but at the same time, it's very legible. So there's no distressing on it. The adds some kind of fun contrast to it, also legible. And I just love that ligature of the T to H there. And it's overall just a really simple logo type that would work well with the brand. Below that, you'll see Local Gothic is the font here. That's really fun, playful type that kind of resembles, I think it was based on actually signage, where if you've seen like fast food restaurants and things like that have signage and different kind of letters that they can manually put in. And I think the typeface designer found a place that had like several different alphabets all kind of put together, like they had just accumulated over the years. And so that's what this typeface is based off of. So it kind of has this vintage feel. I initially thought of wood type. That's just the background of my grandfather was a wood typesetter and also metal type as well. But it reminds me of that. And it reminds me of Hatch show print. So one thing to note when it comes to setting type is to understand kind of some heritage and history that comes with different type styles. And some of this just comes over time and learning and looking at analyzing different type like we're doing now, dissecting typography. And you'll kind of understand some of this heritage that comes along with it. So Smokehouse, the typeface there using the logo type is very representative of kind of a sturdy, I could just see it as like a barbecue restaurant or like maybe it's a grill company or something like that. And then the playful Local Gothic has a lot more play in those letter forms, but at the same time, it resembles some of that that craftsmanship. And it brings me back to personally referencing wood type, which is a very handcrafted thing. And I think about that with the Smokehouse, and I'm imagining that they maybe smoke their meats for 12 plus hours or something like that. And it's a very hands-on process. So pairing type in that way is something I love to do that has some kind of history behind it. Maybe not everyone gets that from the initial go, but it's nice to have some kind of concept behind it, tying it into the brand itself. So that's local Gothic. And then below that is Condensed. And why these fonts work well together is because they're just very different. And I use pretty much just one color here. The Smokehouse, the logo type is a different color. Easily could have been the same color as the rest of it, but it really helps to work in one color so that you are not distracted by patterns, photos, imagery, things like that. And you are really focused on getting that type to work, getting something to really sing about the type rather than leaning too much onto other elements. So often I start actually in black and white, and then I bring in color and photography later. So that's a really helpful tip as well. And then just feel free to explore. I think this is really out of my personal comfort zone. My clients, I don't see any of my past clients using local Gothic. That said, I would love to work with a brand that wants to use a font like that. So getting out of your comfort zone is really helpful as well. Finding a new typeface that maybe you haven't worked with before, and then getting creative and creating a layout for that. And this typeface really kind of narrated the rest of the brand for me. It helped me come up with this tagline, something that's like really bold and playful. Actually pulled it from another barbecue restaurant. And then at the bottom, that's just something I added, facts are facts, y'all. I'm from Texas. I had to include the y'all there. So just kind of getting playful with the content, pairing with the playful type there as well. So this is all sans, the local Gothic and Condensed. And then the logo type itself is, I guess it's kind of a slight serif. It's a really distinct display font. And so it sets itself apart as well. And you'll notice too, there's a really clear distinction on hierarchy, even separated by these little stars on there. That's really important when creating a layout design as well, is making sure you're focused on what's the main thing you want this to communicate, and then having other things take second, third, fourth priority. So on here, the tagline in the middle, they say we're the barbecue capital of Texas, is the priority. That's the biggest, boldest statement there. Next up is facts are facts, y'all. That's second priority. Third priority is the logo type. So make sure as you're creating a type-driven brand, you can even write down and number off. I do that often. Number off what's the main hierarchy here. What am I trying to communicate? And that will help you kind of create a structured type-driven brand. I hope this little exercise was helpful, kind of seeing behind the scenes of how I created these two designs here, the typefaces used, and just kind of the concept behind it, as well as the process in creating a type-driven brand that has contrast, hierarchy, and variation within the fonts. And hopefully this is helpful for you, and I'm looking forward to another session coming up.